All right, let's dive into the Broke theme. So over here on my screen, I have the Broke theme repo automatically pulled up. And you can kind of scroll through the docs and get a feel for exactly what it is, but it focuses around the WhatStack, which is essentially WordPress, HTMX, Alpine, and Tailwind. You can kind of extend it, as you can see I did here, to kind of be playful, but it also includes ACF Pro and ACF Extended. And the mission of the theme is essentially a build your own page builder experience for the editor. So this is more for like, it's really for any WordPress, project, but it's very useful in the way that it allows you to really hand off something that the editors can use and they won't break, unlike page builders do. It also gives you the benefits of Alpine and HTMX, which we'll cover shortly, and the ease of styling via Tailwind. So with that being said, the setup is actually really simple. I tried to make this as beginner friendly as possible, and we'll kind of go over that as we're moving through here. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and copy the clone string from right here, and we're going to go into WP local, which is on the other screen, and we're going to go ahead and get started setting up our project. So right here, I'm just going to go ahead and create I'll just call it watch project. I'll just call it watches for now. And set up my username. So let's see. Go ahead and set that up. And while that generates, I'm going to go ahead and talk about next steps. So next steps, we're going to go ahead and trust the URL. In case you guys haven't used WP Local before and you don't know how to set it up, or you're new to WordPress theme development, it's just useful to get this started from the start. So we're going to head and do trust. We're just going to prompt you. Slightly different for Windows, but pretty much the same process. You're going to get this issue URL, and what you want to do is you want to stop site, close it out, and I'm going to go ahead and pull up the keychain access, and I'm going to search for watches, and you'll see it right here. It doesn't trust it, so I'm going to get info, go to trust, always trust, and we are good to go. So all we have to do now, I just want to make sure it's trusted. Okay, so all we have to do now is reopen WP Local. Right there. And we didn't close it fully out, so I'm going to go and do that. And back up. Scroll down and open watches back up. And what this did essentially is give it a HTTPS instead of HTTP, which makes things simpler, especially if you're pasting information over or using specific JavaScript libraries which require secure connection. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to open the site folder. And if you haven't used WordPress before, you don't really know your way around the file system. Essentially from here, it's app, public, WP content, and then themes. I'm going to go ahead and copy that over into my terminal, which you can see over here on the screen. You'll see I have the file path, which is right here. Go ahead and change directories into it, which is cd/file path. All right, clear that out. And what I'm going to do is now I'm going to git clone. So right here, I'm going to grab this URL and git clone. And there we go. We do ls. We can see we have the Broke theme installed. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually clean out this file directory and delete these, the ones that come with WordPress, and exit out. And then I'm going to do change directory again over to Broke theme. And you'll now see that we are in the theme. Okay. From here, we can essentially open up Visual Studio Code or PHP Storm, whatever you're using. Figured the majority of people will be using VS Code. So there we go. We have it over on our other screen right here. All right, so this is when the project gets a little bit more interesting. So now that we're into the project, very simple setup. As I said before, I'm going to go ahead and open the terminal just to keep things simple. And I'm going to do npm use 18.7. You probably already have this. You may not need it, but npm is just the version management system for npm, just to make sure I'm on it. Okay, and this project runs both Composer and npm, so go ahead and start off with a Composer install. If you have never used Composer before and you're on Mac, you'll just use brew to install it. If you're on Windows, you can follow the Composer install docs for Windows, and it should be pretty self-explanatory from there, but overall, if you can run Composer, it's installed. So I'm gonna go ahead and set that up, and it's going to install the files for PHP in the project. All right, and then I'm going to run npm install, which is going to install all the JavaScript files. And we are good to go. So after running npm install, we're ready to start diving in. All right, so part of the theme, I set up a CLI, which is command line interface, to make things a little bit easier just for initial project setup. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to head over to package.json just to show you where it's at in case you forget these commands. But right here, you'll see broke block, and broke layout. These are commands you can run from the terminal. So for example, npm run broke, and it's going to start, and it's going to say, what's the name of your project? Well, it's watches, and my local URL is https watches.local. And let's just say the production URL is going to be watches.org. All right, and then it's going to ask you if you want to set up browser sync. So browser sync is pretty important. What it does is let you live reload the project when you're in development. It just makes it easier and faster to develop. So I'm going to go ahead and hit yes. It's all done. And then from here, you can kind of navigate around. You can watch this tutorial, which you're watching now, read the docs, or head over to create a block and create a layout. And this is really where we kind of dive into the fundamentals about the theme. So the theme has both blocks and layouts, but they're used for two different purposes. And as I said before, this theme is really focused around creating a page builder for your clients. So when you create a layout, it's creating a component that your clients can use for archives and single pages or custom post type pages, things like that. Whereas a block is more for long form content or post. It's an easy way to have a separation of concerns for what the editor is concerned about rather than what the engineer is concerned about. And it really helps out with keeping things organized and clean while also being pretty fun to develop with. Layouts is really the main thing, and it focuses around ACF and ACF Extended. And you do need both ACF Extended and ACF Pro in order to use the theme. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to head back over into local, and I'm going to go ahead and open up WP admin. Pull it onto the screen, and let's start setting things up. So from here, you go ahead and log in. I'm going to navigate over to Appearance and activate the theme, and you're going to get the prompt to install both plugins. So ACF Pro, obviously you can't just pull it down because it's a paid plugin. So if you have your own repo up, set up with the theme though, you can change it to do so, which I'll do a different video about. But for everybody else in the world, let's go ahead and install Advanced Custom Fields. Activate, and then I'm going to install ACF Extended. All right, and if we go over to plugins, just make sure everything is installed and activated, and we're not going to worry about this warning message right now. So right now we have everything and it's good to go. Now for the next part, what we're going to do is we're going to actually head over to the field groups area, and you're going to see that this sync available is here. Now with the sync available, with ACF Extended, it forces the sync between the theme and the actual ACF so that you can actually keep everything in version management and keep it committed to your repo. If you have ACF Extended Pro, it gets even better. But that's the general gist of it. ACF Extended is what we use for dynamic rendering of layouts, which I'll show you in just a moment. But I'm going to go ahead and start importing the components, and I'm going to leave the other one alone for right now. You can kind of explore that on your own. It's a debugging feature. I'll just do it since I'm already here, but that's the general gist of it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this over to the other screen, minimize out local, and we're going to start diving into things. So from here, you can create your layout and create your block. And you're probably thinking like, what is a layout? And you probably know what a Gutenberg block is if you're here. With layouts, it's a type of component, and they're really simple to create and use and manage. So we'll kind of start in that area. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create the layout. And when it goes through the layout creation process, actually, let me back up 1 second. Let's start with what the layout is. If I move over into the theme, this is where all the main theme files are. All right, inside of here, you'll see layouts and then components. You'll also notice earlier, or on the other screen, you have the ACF field group components, which has a flexible content field also called components, and has 2 example components already added in here. Now these ones are already set up and ready to use, and you'll see like just as some basic fields, these 2 items right here, which will be important soon, and you'll be able to kind of get started with it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and go back over into the code editor, and I'm going to clear this out, and I'm going to run npm run watch. Now npm run watch is going to start everything up and generate CSS, all that good stuff. And you'll see on my other screen over here on the top right, it is blank and it's good to go. If I go back into WordPress, I can kind of give you an example of how layouts versus blocks work. Now, right in the example project, you have 2 example layouts and 1 example block. So for the layouts, I'll show you that part first. If I go over to pages, I'm going to go ahead and delete these out just to keep things clean and add new. Let's just type home. All right. You'll notice when I add row, this is a flexible content field. You now have this page builder-esque thing that shows you all your different components and categories of components. So you can create categories, create individual components, do whatever you need to do. It's all inside of here. And it gives you a nice little way for your editors to come in here and start to manage things. So I'm going to start off with the hero component. And you'll see custom fields like normal. And you might think like from the start, like this doesn't really solve the problem around flexible content fields. But if you actually click the top here, you'll see you now have live previews of all the components, which is what makes this special. Now the editor can see what they're doing. So for example, I type in some information, and now we're good to go. Now I don't have all of the fields synced here, and it's because in this video we're going to show exactly how that works, but you'll get an idea. If I go and update this and preview it on the front end, you'll start to see, here's my example component. Now there's some pretty cool features I tried to include just to give you examples of how exactly everything works. And when we look at the components, they'll become more obvious. But for example, if you look at this example header as persist count, you go in here, it starts to count. If I refresh the page, the count stays. All right, so you have persistent state in your application. You can use this for forms, filters, saving settings, all kinds of things, and pretty much takes WordPress up a notch because it's not really a common thing in any WordPress instance. And then you have the concept of what HTMX does, which is AJAX swapping, and it's very simple to do. Back in the day, you used to use jQuery. It was much more robust. You had to create swaps for every single individual thing, whereas with HTMX, it's just a couple attributes on your HTML, and you're good to go. So when I click fragment swap, for example, it can start to pop in what exactly that component is. So we will kind of cover that as we go a little bit further, but just to kind of show you some nice and interesting things that come with it. If I pop back into the editor, you can say, click the pricing table. Same thing, has one field done. my package. And there you go. It's live preview updates right there. And you'll see like all the styling is nice and clean, exactly as the front end. The JavaScript doesn't run in the editor because it doesn't really serve a purpose, but it's mostly just for previewing the data that you're entering. The other benefit is that as a developer, you're going to need to reference different parts of like how this exactly works. And as you go through this, for example, I'm going to go back to the front end here. And now you'll see I have both of my items right here. And I'm going to go ahead and do debug equals true. And spelled it wrong. Now you have a nice little debugger that pops up that I've provided. If you activate this, you can now see the Timber context. Now this is going to play an important role with how you actually develop throughout your entire WordPress experience. This is something that it's not common in the WordPress ecosystem, and it drove me nuts when creating custom themes that I couldn't see the API data. And so I really wanted to make this like a fluid concept for everybody to really take advantage of. And the way that this works is it shows you all the data that's available in the markup from the start that you can use with Twig to easily add into your templates. If I click over here on components, you'll see that here's Hero 1, here's the pricing table, and then the individual data that's available for them based on what's been entered and the custom fields that have been created. So if you were to take this into example, for example, right here, I'm going to go ahead and click the subheader. And I'm going to swap the screen back over into the browser. And I'm going to head over to Theme, Layout, Component, Hero 1. You're going to see it's just an index.html file, but it has Twig inside of it. Now, all Twig components use this layout dot. So anything that's in that object that you saw earlier in the debugger, it's just layout dot that. So if you're used to like JavaScript or anything like that, dot notation, that's exactly how it works. So right here, this would be where the subheader goes. So I'm going to go ahead and delete whatever is here. And I'm going to do layout dot subheader. All right. Swap back over into the other screen. And now we have the example header right here. And you'll see that it reflects exactly as the data shows here. So anytime changes come in or you add fields into here, it's automatically added into the debugger, making your life so much easier. Now, when it comes to actually creating the layouts themselves and getting started with things like that, the process is relatively simple. And I'll go ahead and give you a little bit of a preview into that. And go ahead and switch back over into the code editor. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bend that down and type in npm run, let's say broke layout. All right, so what this is going to walk you through is the layout creation tool. It's very simple. So existing means, hey, I want to create another component because components is already in layouts. So if I were to click existing, it'll show you a list of directories that are available that you're currently working on, and then automatically create a group of files into there to help you structure the project. So with components, it's right here. And I'm going to name this, let's just say blog grid. All right. And you'll see blog grid was generated right here, and it gets an index.html, a style.css, and a scripts file. Now you don't have to use the style.css. It's just there. Same thing with the scripts file. These are all optional for you to use or reference if you need them. And for the most part, you're really just going to use this specific thing. So that's pretty much it for getting started with the layouts. And you'll be able to come back over into WordPress and go into the admin, go into field groups, components. Now, because it's in the components directory, it's a components layout. I'm going to clone this over, and I'm just going to call it blog grid. You'll see where the file naming convention, that's why there's that underdash in the file name blog grid in the theme. It's because it lines up right here. And then it has these two items right here if you're cloning, and it's how it gets the live preview essentially is right here. If you're cloning out the same thing over and over again, it should automatically be there. If you're not, just don't forget to add them in. And then from here, you can kind of go through, add your thumbnail, your fields, whatever you need to do. For now, I'm just going to leave this exactly as is, and we're good to go. I'm going to hit save. I'm going to go over to the home, and I'm going to click blog grid. Now, there's nothing really here. So what I wanted to do was make it really easy for you guys to kind of get up and going quickly. And how I did that was the following. Now that we're back in the theme, I included this directory called broke components. So for example, I can go over here and there's Tailwind and HTML already created. And we're currently in the process of adding Twig to these files with a preset of fields that will automatically come with the theme that you can just use and kind of get going. But it's supposed to be like a starting point essentially. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy this blog component over into the index.html, and I'm going to hit save. Now, if we go back to the back end of WordPress, and I click this, like that, you'll now see, boom, we have a blog component. If I hit update, go to the front end, you'll see that it now exists. And if I click the debugger and activate, it is also there. So you are ready to roll with your new component. Now, the block creation part, that's also, it works very similarly. So if we go back over into the theme, clear this out and do npm run broke block. It's going to start the same little creation flow. So let's just call this, I don't know, let's look at the partials that I have available. Command palette. Right. There we go. And you don't have to include this dash. It will automatically do it for you. But you'll kind of get the idea. And what this did is actually in the blocks directory right here, it created a command palette. Now, it automatically swaps everything here. So, for example, I shouldn't have added this dash because now it adds it to the name. You can just put whatever you want. So if I were to delete this out, for example, and redo it, clear, and run block. Now let's just run it. There we go. That way it's a little bit prettier. You see command palette is now there. And everything is the way it's supposed to be. Now, what's important about these files is that they automatically generate your markup file, which is, once again, index.html, but you can use Twig in it. And the way that you access the ACF fields, instead of layout, it's just fields dot, let's say, header, or whatever you want to do. You can do it all in there. And if you want Twig syntax, you can just go into VS Code and type in Twig with HTML, and it will automatically highlight. The reason that we use index.html files, it's very important for Alpine, which I'll kind of cover in a minute. But just to finish this example right here, we wanted to just put some basic markup in. Or actually, let's just copy over command palette, right? So I'm going to go in here. I'm going to go back to the block index.html, and I'm going to save it, right? So you'll see when I save, it splits these attributes on each line. That's a benefit of being in HTML land, is that it's much more readable. It works prettier, which is how we get the code to format correctly. Twig just doesn't have the same support as HTML, and you can do a lot more with this. So anyways, this will be set up this way. And what I'm going to do is make sure that I'm running browser sync. So we can just do npm run watch. And pretty much browser sync is important because, like, for example, if I save, see how it updates. make sure the CSS is compiled for Tailwind so that everything is visible. And now that we did this, we've just created a block. So let's go back over to the other screen to see it. All right, heading over to WordPress admin, I'm going to go into a post, go into our handy dandy hello world. All right, and if I look right here, I have command palette. There it is. All right, if I hit save, update, got on the front end, we are good to go. It's just a basic command palette component. And you can really start to modify it from here. So from here, you'd have to add, like, for example, custom fields so that the block actually has them. So let's head over to field groups. Let's call it commands palette. And let's just say block title or title. And we're going to register it as a block. I just selected a command, it automatically happens. You don't have to do any of that work. So I hit save. And now if I head back over into post, click my block, you'll now see the title is on the block. So, and if you can't see it, because my screen is in the way, it's right there. All right. So from there, for example, this title, and I'm gonna hit update. And what I'm going to do is flop back over to the code editor, and I'm going to look for the placeholder. Right, what do you need? And I'm just going to put I think it's title. All right. Let's see. And just to check on a couple of things, make sure I didn't change it. Nope, looks good. Like that index.html. Dun, 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 dun. And we should be good to go. Oh, yeah. If I switch over the screen, you'll see it. So in the placeholder where it has header's name, it's because I passed it as the placeholder. So very simple to set up and go, and you're pretty much on your way. Now, whenever you're using the system, it's very flexible, and that's like one of the main benefits of it is that you don't have to really worry about much because everything kind of just works. And there's a lot of like interesting benefits, which, for example, the debugger, which is great. The other thing is like previewing a specific partial on a page. So let's say that you have like a custom field that might use a specific layout, and you kind of want to just see that standalone component. You're doing your CSS on that page, but you don't want to look at the whole page and scroll down and through it every time. You can actually do that. It's just component equals hero1, and write that. Now the component is available for you. The other benefit of this is that you can actually use it for HTMX to swap in components. So we're going to set that up real quick. I'm going to flip back over into the code editor, and I'm actually going to go to my hero block to show you exactly how it works. So inside the hero, you'll see this is the persist count. Right here, we have a little bit of Alpine happening, which is how the persist happens. You'll see like X data persist 0. That's how it's counting. Essentially, as it counts, it goes to local storage and saves with the session of the user. I mean, that's it. That's all you had to add was that persist and X on click, which is right here. Now, for this one, it's a little bit more complicated. I wouldn't say more complicated, just different. But you'll see like it's going to fetch from question mark component equals pricing table. Well, it's actually supposed to be pricing table. And I'll commit that to the repo so it just works for everybody. But what this is going to do is use HTMX to fetch a component and put it onto the page. If I move back over into the browser, you'll see I can still persist count, and then I can swap in. the component onto the page, just like that. So when thinking about swaps, a lot of interesting ways to use it are around filters, search, forms, really anything that requires data to be pulled from another page. It's one of the benefits of HTMX and WordPress is that all the URLs get generated automatically. So as long as you have a design on that URL, it's very simple to just swap in a component. So think about it from like a filters point of view. Let's say you have a list of cars. They want to only see black cars. Well, it's going to search, or it's going to essentially go get question mark cars equals color black. And it's going to swap out the current cars on the page for the black cars. It's pretty magical how easy it is. It's usually more cumbersome because you have to deal with pagination and all those different things. You just don't have to deal with this. It makes life a lot simpler. As far as like when to use HTMX versus when to use Alpine, HTMX is, like I said, advanced functionality, searches, filters, forms. You'll use it for some other things, like maybe some potential navigation. You'll use it here and there, and it's really like a matter of preference. You can either go all in on HTMX and just not use Alpine. Same thing with Alpine. You can go all in on Alpine and not use HTMX. But the two together are really strong. When it comes to Alpine, Alpine is generally used for interactivity. You can use it for everything. It's just, it depends on how much JavaScript you want to write. HTMX cuts down a lot of JavaScript, especially when it comes to making requests. For Alpine, anything show and hide, transitions, client side. So like, for example, let's say as you scroll, you want to paginate in more posts. That's really easy to do with Alpine. All right. So now if I move back over to the code editor, you can kind of go through and see exactly what's happening here. Because all of the data is provided to you on the layout, you're not really having to do much, but you can extend this. So for example, let's say that you have, even with this blog grid, right? So right now this is a static blog grid, and I'm just going to pull this component up on the other screen just so it's there. All right, so normally I would want to go get each post and things like that. One way to do this would be you could either create, if you wanted the editor to have control over what their query was, you could add query fields directly to the layout. So for example, let them select their post type and then how many posts, and then it just issues a query. And you can do the query right inside the template. It's very simple to do. So like, for example, I can just go ahead and do %set args equals this type post per page too. Let's say like that. And what I want to do from here is I want to go down and get rid of this static one, and I just want to do a loop. So for post and posts. All right, but we forgot one critical step, which is actually making the query. So in order to query, very simple, we're just going to do set post equals, and for this you just want to do get posts args. All right, and I'm going to put some syntax highlighting. And just like that, we now have a loop looping over the posts. And for this example, I will just do, let's say, post.author. And the reason that you use post instead of layout is because we've just introduced new posts to the layout. So that's one way of thinking about things. And if you're curious, like where the data comes from, what it looks like, how to debug it, I'll cover that in just a second. So right here, I'm going to do post title, and I'm going to go back over to the page, and you'll see hello world is now rendering on our front end. And just like that, I created, an active query and hooked it up to the thing. And you can kind of go back through and start adding in your other pieces of data. So if I were to go in here, I want to change this out. post.content. All right, and if I refresh, you can see it's pulling in the command palette in this case. You might want to use excerpt, which has a short excerpt, and we are good to go. We can replace the other pieces of data later. In this specific case, we just swapped it all out and we're good. But let's say we want to debug this, right? Like we want to know what this post comes from. If I switch back over into here, now this is not going to understand that we pulled in posts. And the reason it doesn't is because we did it in the template. So if I look at state, it doesn't know. It's like, what's going on here? It doesn't have any idea of the data. Well, I already thought ahead of this. And the way that you can do this is actually get rid of the debug on the URL, which I'm just removing the query param. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to instead include it in the template. So all you have to do to include it in the template, and this is one of the best features of Timber and Twig, is you can just include things pretty much from anywhere. And inheritance also drips through. So like, for example, I included this post right here. Now, let's say I wanted the post data to go to another component. Well, I could just include that component and it automatically inherits posts, so on and so forth. And as I create more tutorials, I'll show you a lot more on the advanced parts of Twig and Timber. But in this specific case, what we're doing here is we're going to actually create a debugger. So we're just going to do set state equals post. And then we're going to do include. Now this is a special thing for the theme, which is helper / debug. And I think it's .html, but it might be Twig. Let me make sure. I don't know if I've changed it yet. Now you'll see like it starts to push the twig to the top. That's because we have that HTML formatting. And this is like pro and con of it. If you actually were to switch it over into Twig, it would be a little bit nicer to format, but it wouldn't really because most of the formatters don't work. But in this case, let's just make sure. So real quick, with helper, obviously, comes from the helper directory. And you'll see debug.html. So now I know I have the right file. So what this is doing is looking into this directory and grabbing this file and putting it on the page. If I refresh the page, nothing is happening. Let me make sure this is working correctly. I'm just going to do that real quick. That's right. Okay, 1 second. I am going to fix this. What I'm going to do is create an inline helper. So just like that, I'm just going to, and this is like the goal. So I didn't really hide anything in packages like Composer. I wanted you guys to be able to kind of know what's going on. And I'll commit this after the video, but all this is going to do is it's just making a copy, but it doesn't require a query param. If I look at the other debug, you'll see at the top here it says if params.debug, so it has to be true. Right here in this inline debugger, it doesn't need it. So if I go back into my blog grid component, and I'm going to switch this debug.html to inline debug.html, and I'm going to go over here, and boom, we now have the debugger. And if I activate the state, you'll see all the posts. So now you can see all the data that's associated with it. Now, This is extremely helpful when you're going through and debugging something because let's say you want to see like the image, right? Like if you had a feature image, like you could just go through and filter. Same thing with like custom fields, like for example, instead of doing the debugger here, I'm gonna get rid of that. And for each post, what I'm gonna do is if loop.index equals 1, and if, all right, so that means the first item in the array, I want to do %set state equals post.meta, which means give me all the custom fields, right? You don't want to use that in production, but it's good for debugging. And then I'm going to do include that helper / line debug.html. And what this will do, I refresh and activate, and I can see like it has a custom field called edit lock. Like in this case, there's no custom fields on the item, so it wouldn't make sense. But you get the gist of it. I can just, include this debugger anywhere. You can also define multiple states, multiple debuggers, things like that. If you want it to not be in this like hover window like I have it, you can also just use the Prism script, which is Prism. Right? And that will actually put it all on the page so you can see it. Now it does obviously change your layout, things like that. But that way you're not dealing with the little window. If you wanted to kind of get a whole view of everything, the Prism component will allow you to right away. Anyways, I think this is a good intro for diving through the actual Broke theme, what it's all about. I know that you guys will have plenty of questions, lots of issues, kind of getting started, especially if you're new to custom theme development. But this is really like one of the best approaches for not only how to build a custom theme in WordPress, but how to actually build projects for clients. So if you're someone who has an agency or whatever you're working through, this type of workflow not only gives you the freedom and accessibility to use what you need as a developer, it makes it dead simple. And that's really the key here is I wanted it to be fast and easy to create complex themes and complex styles without having to deal with the headaches of other frameworks like Bedrock or even the headaches of page builders. I really wanted that page builder experience, but not for me because I don't need it as a developer, but the client does need it. And that's what I thought this would really help to solve. So, and just to kind of show you a little bit like how that actually feels, it's like if I were to go into the page as an editor and I go through here and I see I have the components right here. You'll see like the debuggers now showing up here. I'm just going to delete this layout, right? Yeah, I'm going to delete this layout. Now I'm going to put the blog right here, put the pricing here. I'm going to hit save. And I'm going to go to the home. Boom. They can easily modify and change layouts as needed based on their requirements. So like the marketing teams, like let's say that you have a bunch of components, like landing page components, they can easily just click, landing pages there, fill in the content and be done. And that's really the key here is that it's a controlled workflow for them that's familiar to them. It's not all the knobs that, Elementor and other page builders have that, create sites that don't last. Because these clients are paying you for a dependable site that's going to last them a long time. And that's what this system really provides. And just kind of go through, there's a lot of just developer-friendly features, and we're always going to be adding more. Like, for example, like this admin debugger, like if you go through here, you'll see I can actually I can be in the admin. I can see the data for each component as I go through. Right here, things like that. Like, it's just the little things that make life easy. A little bit easier on the developers, and it helps you to really put out a quality work really fast. As a person who's kind of agnostic towards no code versus coded, I've used Bricks and Quickly and every other page builder out there, and code is just so much faster. I can wireframe and mock up a site in this and have that page building experience right out of the box. And then the rest of the job is just, what custom fields do I need? What requirements do I have to fulfill? What complexity will they add to the project? But it's nice to be able to go from Figma to code in just a few minutes and have your blocks created and be good to go. Anyways, that's the introduction to the Broke theme, a little bit about the WhatStack. If you have any questions, feel free to comment in the video below. I'm looking forward to answering and helping you guys get started. If you need anything, just let me know. And this is Daniel at broke.dev. All right, see you soon.